A whole bunch of stuff to talk about, but I'm not even going to talk about any of it because this is much more important. And of course, I'm talking about what's happening in Israel, which I call for that, by the way, because they're just like the U.S. government for the most part, completely evil. And in fact, in some ways, even more evil. People to this day still, for the most part, maybe not you, because if you're watching this video, you're probably pretty smart. But most people, even libertarians and stuff, a lot of them still think 9/11 was done by Osama bin Laden from a cave in Afghanistan. And it was actually done by Mossad, Israel, and the CIA, and covered up by the FBI. And I said at the time, the reason it's so important, even still, 22 years later, for people to be, if you don't know, because all you have to do is look into it. If you don't know what happened then when the next ones happen, people will fall for it again. And here we are. Yeah, it's happening again, and everyone's falling for it again. There's only been a few people, although I have to say, it's been much better this time around. Most of the libertarian type people, who are the decent people, the good people, the people who believe in freedom and love and peace, we're crazy, the anarchists, the crazy ones, the voluntarists, all the people who come to Acapulco, all those kind of people. A lot of them actually haven't figured out what's happened yet, but they've at least been speaking out against basically everything going involved. They've brought up one point that's a very good point, because all the Western narrative is that, poor Israel is being attacked by these evil terrorists, which is a completely false narrative. If you just look back at the founding of Israel, which was actually the plan by the Rothschilds, way back then, to create the Rothschilds create their own country and say it's for the Jews, which is totally not, and they've actually been destroying the Jews. I'll get into that. But that was actually a big part of how Israel was founded. This is the beginning, I think, of something massive, which I said was going to happen. I actually said that there's three big things that are going to happen. And I've said the whole time in the newsletter and in these videos, I didn't know what order. One big one is the financial system and economic collapse, which we're right on the verge of. It's actually been collapsing. Everyone's already super poor. That's going to be huge. And then I said the next COVIDs, the COVIDs 2.0, they've been saying the first one was just a warm-up to get all the systems in place, all the vaccine passports, all the face recognition, the digital IDs, all these sort of things. And then the third big thing I said that they're probably going to do is something similar to a World War III. And what are we seeing now? So as of right now, I'm of the opinion that they're probably going to do World War III before they do the next COVIDs. Although they could do it right in the middle of it, they want to cause mass chaos. This is their last big shot. And they'll probably do it during or right before the economic collapse and financial collapse, and then they'll blame it all on that stuff, and they'll say, well, that's why it all happened. It's because, there was a huge pandemic, killed 1 billion people, and then there was the World War III, so it wasn't the central banksters or the government's fault. But anyway, because of what's happened in the last couple of days, it looks like World War III is coming first. This is an actual operation by the same kind of people who did 9/11, and Israel was very involved in 9/11. The bad guys in this case is the Israel government, and even the people in Israel don't realize what's going on. Just like the Americans in 9/11 didn't realize it was their own government doing it. This is what they do. This is the thing that's so hard, that's so tricky to try to tell people, because basically how they do things, these people, like how they did 9/11, how they've done World War II, all these things, it's mostly like the Rothschilds, central bankers, and all that kind of stuff. And these guys are super smart. And they know how to take advantage of people's emotions and stupidity and their fear and use fear. Like they're masters of deception. And like what's happening here, you'll probably see like it was only a couple weeks ago, hundreds of thousands of people were out in the streets in Israel protesting Netanyahu and the government. And it was like serious. Yeah, it was like October 1st. And remember too, like the people in Israel have been some of the most locked down and lethally injected people in the world. Like the Israel government's trying to kill and enslave everyone in Israel as well. They're basically like in their own little concentration camp. And a lot of Israelis were starting to wake up to that and starting to protest. And so what do you do in that situation, right? When like people are starting to wake up to how evil the government is, you create an enemy from the outside that puts everyone into massive fear. Massive fear. Like I can only imagine how a lot of people in Israel are feeling in the last couple of days. I have to really dive deep now and understand all of these things. Hamas, Hezbollah, what's really going on, all these kinds of things. But I do know that so many people have said, like Ron Paul said it like 20 years, like how great is Ron Paul? But he said decades ago that Hamas was basically the creation of the U.S. and Israel government. Hamas is basically Israel's Al-Qaeda and ISIS, which were created by the CIA. Most wars are actually started this way, all by false flags. And this is just another false flag. But here's an Israeli woman who used to be in the Israeli army, and she talks about how on that night, all the military left their posts. What a surprise.
Apparently, Israeli defense forces that were supposed to be around Gaza were placed around the West Bank because of security concerns, so that the Gaza envelope was left unoccupied with military. They say around 60 to 80% of that area was left without the IDF forces that were supposed to be there. A year ago, there was a military operation in Gaza to prepare for such events, and ongoingly there are trainings for these kind of scenarios. This raises serious questions for me anyway about Israeli intelligence. What happened? 2 years ago, there was a successful deployment of underground barriers with sensors to alert exactly on these kind of terrorist breaches. Israel has one of the most advanced and high-tech armies. How come there was zero response to the border and fence breaching? I cannot understand that. Personally, I served in the IDF 25 years ago in the intelligence forces. There's no way, in my view, that Israel did not know of what's coming. A cat moving alongside the fence is triggering all forces. So what happened to the strongest army in the world? How come border crossings were wide open? Something is very wrong here. Something is very strange. There's a general sense of insecurity in Israel. There's political and social instability and unrest. Public funds are being misused on agendas such as COVID, climate, judicial reform, abolishing cash, and many more. The current government is highly corrupt in my view, while the previous one was no better. I don't care about having a popular opinion. I care about exposing evil forces wherever and whomever they are. So to me, this surprise attack seems like a planned operation on all fronts. This is a failure to protect the people of Israel, for sure. Perhaps the biggest failure since the Yom Kippur War exactly 50 years ago, if not